Welcome everybody to the Research Cafe for October. And my name is Paula Gregory. I have been teaching grant writing to students and postdocs for about over 25 years, just realized. And so one of the things that we're trying to institute is some help with your grant writing, and in particular give you some ideas of specific sections and how to do a good job on those. So what I've done is pull together helpful hints for the specific aims page. And I'm going to bring up a slide, but next month's Research Cafe is going to be a specific aims workshop. And that will require you, if you would like someone to review a panel of very seasoned scientists who've been on lots of study sections, to review your specific aims page, give you some written feedback, but also provide you in the workshop. It'll be in person. The panel can discuss with you questions, problems, etc. you may have had with your aims page. So with that said, again, welcome everybody. I'm gonna share my screen. So that workshop is on November 20th, which is a Wednesday. You know, all the research cafes, we try to make all of them on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock. We think it's going to take about an hour and a half. It is in person in IREB room 520. To participate, you've got to submit your specific aims page for review on 11/11. And I will be reminding everybody that this is coming up. We did this once before, and I think people found it quite valuable. You do have to register, and Margaret will figure out how we register, because I don't know how that'll work. But anyway, again, we'll have this panel of seasoned reviewers that'll have a week to look over your aims page, provide you with some written feedback, and then in person we'll discuss the aims pages and, you know, kind of how best to improve your proposal. So I really hope you guys will take us up on this. This is something that the NCATs, the CTSAs that have a lot of faculty development components, they routinely do these workshops. And that's where I first got introduced to this idea at UAB's CCTS. And I think it is a really good idea for us to have this here and do it every year. Okay, so if you can't explain what you're trying to get across in simple, now that doesn't mean plain lay language, but in a simple, logical way, then it's not going to work. And according to Einstein, you don't understand it. So I think the specific aims page, at least when I write grants, my aims page gets edited and changed multiple times. And that's because I write it at the very beginning, but then as I'm writing the research plan and other components, I may go back in and change the aims to reflect those changes I've made in the research plan. So it really needs to summarize the background, the preliminary data, and which experiments you're going to do. This is just to make you laugh, I hope. So the way it's supposed to work is you write the grant, get the money, do the research, publish the results, and then use that to write another grant. How it really works is, jokingly, you do the research, you get the results, call them preliminary data, write the grant based on what you have pretty much already done, and then get funded. And now you can publish the results. And then supposedly you use some of that money to come up with expanded projects. I can't stress this enough to everybody. The specific aims page is the only page that everybody on study section is going to read. Therefore, you really have to give a good impression. And the reason I say that, it's not that people on study section aren't going to read other grants other than what they are assigned, but most people aren't going to spend a lot of time reading them. So if I read over the 5 or 10 I have to review, and then look through the others, I'm primarily looking, what was that Ames page about? Oh, that was very interesting. I really want to read more. This one really impressed me. Or this one is so confusing. I don't know what they want to do. So you really want to make sure that this makes a good impression on everyone. There you go. So I think one of the most challenging things for scientists is to write an interesting first sentence, first paragraph that grabs the reader's attention while getting across the significance and the gap in understanding that make up the problem that they are doing research on. I think this is a very good first sentence or two. 1 in 4 adolescents in the US is diabetes or prediabetes, which is double the prevalence compared to a decade ago. Type 2 diabetes disproportionately affects obese non-white youth. An African-American child has a 50% lifetime chance of being diagnosed with diabetes. So right there, she doesn't say, diabetes is bad and lots of people have diabetes. No, she's really getting right to the point. What do you think she wants to study? She wants to study obese non-white youth and work on ways to either predict they got diabetes or something, right? So she gets right to it. And I think that is one of the things that's important. The significance of the disease or condition that you're working on is important. But most of us know that diabetes is bad, or cancer is bad, or having a stroke is bad. You don't have to beat it to death in the Ames page. That significance you can really expand over in the significance section. This is another one I think is just really great. Pap smears, while effective at detecting incident cervical dysplasia, cannot distinguish dysplasia that will resolve naturally from dysplasia destined to progress to cervical cancer. So what do you think she wants to study? She wants to fill that gap, that being able to differentiate between which dysplasia we watch and wait and which dysplasia we need to treat. And she doesn't explain to us that pap smears are important and they're good and they have helped. Yeah, she just gets right to it. She assumes everybody knows what a pap smear is. Ta-da! Number 2, number your references. I can't tell you how many people hand me a specific Ames page with a name and a date for the reference. You do not have room in an NIH grant to put all of that. So just number your references. So that first paragraph of your aims, that is the introduction, needs to convince the reviewers of the significance of the problem your grant is going to address. You're not going to address everything about diabetes or everything about cancer. You're going to address one major discrepancy or gap. And the first paragraph needs to introduce that and then describe what's currently known in this field, and more importantly, what isn't, what's the gap, what's not known. While we know this, we don't know that. This is the gap your proposal is going to fill. I suggest strongly, don't overuse citations on this page. I've seen people where even by the end of the first paragraph, they got 25 citations. And I don't think that you need to do that. you can put those citations over in the significance section, because you're also going to come back with the significance and kind of the literature that backs up your thing. On the other hand, I think it's a great idea to highlight those papers that your lab has published that are related to this problem. That highlights for the reviewer, it's not all this, oh, lots of citations. It's, oh, the only citations on here are about their papers. Okay, so I think they know something about this problem. So this one I thought was another kind of interesting one. Minor but destructive populations of senescent cells have been identified in age-related vascular disease, such as atherosclerosis, with no clinically effective method for their removal or modulation. Okay. They're damaging because they produce these things. Therefore, the essence of these cells, we're going to look at this disease in age. So what do you think she's going to look at? I think she's going to look at these vascular cells and try to figure out a way to identify them. This particular one I have to show because this was one of the people who took my course, and her original first sentence was 100% of us will age. Yeah, I think we already know that. So really, what she wanted to get at was that she's got this mouse model of hair graying, and she wants to understand how lineage-specific adult stem cells are maintained over time. That's really the crux of her whole project, her whole proposal. So for most specific aims pages, I would say all, you should have at least 2 paragraphs, if not 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph having that hook that grabs the reader's attention, that first sentence that really makes you want to read the rest of it. Oh, I didn't know, 1 in 4 African-American children is obese or whatever. Should introduce the big research problem that's being addressed. And again, should clarify where this gap in our current knowledge is. The second paragraph then may explain a little more about the problem, and then should start explaining what your lab. Now, it may start off with, our lab has already done X, Y, and Z, and our preliminary data shows X, Y, and Z. You should derive your hypothesis, as you state a hypothesis, based on your preliminary data. I think that is, and I want to say that is the safest way to present it, in that there may be a couple different theories of how this particular thing works. If you say that we have a hypothesis just based on what our data has shown, and you've got data, then they may not agree with your model, but they can't really disagree that your preliminary data shows these things. You need to outline your aims. Most people will have the last sentence of the paragraph before the aims that will say, we propose, or something that, to test our hypothesis, we propose the following specific aims. The aims should be short sentences with verbs. We'll talk about those verbs. And I strongly suggest that you consider that no, don't consider it. Just do it. Bold the wording of the aims. It makes it easy for the reviewer to find them and say, oh, here they are, here they are. What I've also noticed is people sometimes will have an aim and not tell you how they're going to do it. We're going to characterize these cells. How? Just give me a couple sentences. You don't have to say, grow them in 5 micromolar. Yeah, we don't care about that. But some level of detail on how each aim is going to be accomplished. Then I think you definitely should have at least one sentence at the end about what the overall or long-term goal of this research is. We propose to do so and so, this is going to help understand this thing or whatever. Tell a compelling story. So what you want to do is create a logical flow that is so clear and compelling that reviewers at the study section will be able to follow it, whether they are in your field or not. And that's why I think one of the things you want to do with your AIMS page once you have a good draft put together is have people who are not experts in your field read over it. They could be scientists, but not necessarily somebody who knows your field. Is the logic clear? How we went from A to B to C? I often see people, they go from A to M. And you say, well, how did you get here? Well, everybody knows. No, everybody doesn't know. You don't have to put every detail, but it needs to have a logical flow to it. So the second paragraph really should get at the feasibility. I mean, this is a major thing that you are trying to get across to your reviewer is this is a doable set of, studies. We're at the right place to do these studies. We are the right people to do these studies. This is going to succeed. So convince them that you have the expertise. And oftentimes that may relate to something you've already published. We've already analyzed this gene in mouse cells. We want to analyze this gene in human cells or whatever. Show you have access to all the needed resources to conduct this research. And that doesn't mean, we got a machine, we got a thing, but making sure that it's clear that you know how to get the results. Make sure the project's not growing too big for your targeted time and budget. So for some of you that are maybe junior faculty and you're thinking of applying for an R21, R03, a small 2-year grant, make sure that you are staying within a reasonable, what you're proposing is reasonable to accomplish in about 1.5 years. Because from your time you get the grant to the time that, you get stuff bought and get experiments going, etc., the time goes fast. And the reviewers know that. So they don't expect you to make a knockout mouse in a week or whatever. So make sure that you really are cognizant of that. Now, I would suggest for anybody writing one of the small R's to NIH that you only have 2 aims. That's just my opinion, but a lot of people have that opinion. Present your unpublished preliminary data. And again, how does that lead to your hypothesis? So just take a 50,000-foot look at this. This actually came off the NIH webpage as such a good, organized, clearly stated aims that lay out the roadmap of the project. I didn't even write that. NIH did. So they've got 3 big aims. This is actually an R01 proposal. And unfortunately, I kind of cut off the bottom of this, but they actually have like a couple sentences at the bottom summarizing the whole thing. One thing I would also suggest that you do after you get your aims page worded the way you think you want it, again, hold it kind of at the arm's length and look at it. What I like here is we've got a little bit of white space, just a little bit of space. So it's not, and especially if you are a justifier, if you justify, you love that clean edge over there. If you have no spaces in between, it's like a big square of words. And that tends to lose readers. So things you can do are, break it into paragraphs up here. Even if you put a half space in between these aims, I do a lot of half spaces. That just still gives you a little bit of breathing room versus just, like I said, this just a big square of words. And you'll notice you can either say specific aim. Most people just say aim 1, aim 2, aim 3. Bold, so it's easy to find, okay? And I know I'm doing a lot of talking, so if you have a question, you could put it in the chat, but I might not see it. But just, chime in, jump in, it's fine. This is the whole page that I showed you that I really like that first sentence in. Make sure you've got your headers, like all caps or bold and all caps, so that the header for each section, each major section, specific aims, significance, innovation, approach, those are very clearly defined because the reviewers are going to read over your grant and then they're going to reread it as they're headed to study section. And they may be flipping through there trying to find, where did they say that? Making it easy for them to find those sections of your grant is really important. This one is a proposal for a 2-year grant. So she's got 2 aims, and her hypothesis is also clearly delineated by using a different font, or, well, italicizing the font. So her aims are bolded, her hypothesis is italicized. Whatever you do, whether it's bolding or italics or italic bolded or underlined, use it consistently throughout the entire proposal. So every time you refer to your aims, you would have it bolded, okay? So that it's easy, again, make things easy for the reviewers. And then you see down here, she's got a concluding paragraph about the impact this is going to have on the field, but also for this particular one, this is a critical first step in developing screening tests for cervical cancer. She doesn't say we're going to cure cervical cancer, blah, blah, blah. She just says this is the first step, could really be important. So why do you need a hypothesis or multiple hypotheses? Well, and I found this on the NIH website because that's what the reviewers expect. And that anchors your different specific aims to a common theme. So not just a common field of research. So having a central hypothesis also makes you sit down and kind of focus. I've seen people that have hypotheses that are a paragraph long, and I'm like, what? That's too much. But I liked reading from the NIH. That's what the reviewers expect. So again, the bolding of the aim, that's what the reviewers are looking for. They're looking for finding all these parts very easily. A strong hypothesis should be well focused and testable by the aims. After you create your hypothesis, go back and take stock again of the prospective reviewers and their level of interest based on your aims and hypothesis. This is an R21, so it's a 2-year grant. He just has 2 aims. There's several things in here I'd like to show you. One is he's got this black bar, and I used to not like the black bar, but now I'm become a fan, a black bar fan. Why? It's every major section is marked with this black bar. It doesn't take up any more room. You'll notice any more room than the word would have taken up. He has a very good first sentence, which is about cardiac dysfunction and alcohol, which is what his study is about. It's easy to find his hypothesis, his aims, his 2 aims, there we go. And then he has kind of this summary down here about what his studies are going to accomplish. He also has a diagram. Now, should you have a diagram in the Ames page? Sure, if you want to. However, this is high stakes real estate. So do not waste any space on a diagram that doesn't really add to understanding the mechanism that you're studying, or, you know, I had someone send me, and in her Ames page, she had a picture of someone doing this. And then there was an arrow, and the person was fact. I think we know if you do too much of this, that you get fat. I said, why do you have this? And she said, well, everybody in our place puts a diagram. What? So what? What? Don't put a diagram if it doesn't really help. So I did convince her to move her diagram to the significance section, and she did get the grant. Now, I'm not saying it's because we moved the diagram, but the diagram was not adding to. And I'm going to show you a few examples where I feel the diagram really makes a big difference, or at least is helpful. Yeah, I can't stress this enough. Concise and organize, even to the point of your wording. So you don't want to say, it has been shown that. If it has been shown that, then just say what it was and reference it. Then we know it has been shown because it's got a citation. Another thing that just is kind of sometimes individual or cultural is, we hope to find. No, I'm not giving you $1 million if you just hoping. So, you're going to find something. We will do such and such, be very firm and very like, we're going to accomplish this. Here's a different Ames page. Again, here's the, the title, the section title. He has justified, but he's got some air. We got some air in here. It's not just the big square words. And he has a diagram. And what I like about his diagram is it shows you where aim 1 is going to be, where aim 2 is, that there's different parts of this cell cycle or whatever, that each aim, what are they attacking? What are they addressing? This person actually wrote their aims as questions. Not a fan. But clearly, this one was actually a funded R01. So clearly it didn't hurt him to have the questions. And then he actually labeled what he called the overview, or you could call it a summary, or you can just call it last paragraph. You don't have to have a title. But what do we notice? Oh, look, the aims are bolded and we can find them. And then he's described what he's going to do to accomplish that aim. And I think he did a good job of kind of making it more clear with the diagram. Another thing is indenting your paragraphs. If you indent the paragraph, don't put a double space in between. Either put space in between paragraphs or indent, but don't do both. You don't have to do both. So don't waste space. This is very concise. Think of Campbell's condensed soup. Here's another one with the aims very clearly labeled. And you're like, well, what's the big deal? Because, the reviewer's just like the rest of us. The student just walked in, the lab's on fire. I've got to fill out 200 reports. I got to grade some tests. And which section am I reading? Help me out. Help me out. This diagram, again, shows where each of the aims is going to, the experiments in the area of this life cycle or whatever, that each aim is going to be focused on. The aims are bolded and easy to find. And then again, they have, together our proposed studies have a broad impact. What is the main goal? So I do think, and then I just said, don't put a space and an indent, and well, here we go. A funded grant has a space and indent. It's not that it's wrong, so don't get me wrong. It's that, just be very cognizant of the space that you're using. And then they just labeled their central hypothesis right here. I would have gone on and just italicized the whole hypothesis so it was a little easier to find. But it's okay. It's okay. And down here, they have a hypothesis for each aim. Can you have a central hypothesis and individual? Sure, you can have as many as you want. I'm just saying. So, but sometimes what people are calling a hypothesis is really just a prediction or an anticipation. We anticipate finding X, Y, and Z. And I do think it's important to say, if at all possible, what, based on our data that we have on this aim, we anticipate finding more of whatever we're looking at, or that kind of thing. That's a kind of individual taste. So he's got a diagram, and he talks right in here about his preliminary data. Okay, so again, this is a R01. This was funded. I got this right off the NIH webpage. Did you know you can find whole grants on the NIH webpage? You can. So again, here's the aims. It's got a pretty good opening sentence. Histoplasma causes 100,000 infections annually in the US. And then he goes on to say most are self-limiting, but every once in a while somebody doesn't get better. This is a 2-year grant. I mean, yeah, it's a 2-year grant with 2 aims. And he's explaining that they've developed this fluorescent strain, and this is gonna allow them to quantitate and monitor the replication, et cetera. So they've got a novel or innovative component right there. Also notice the aims are, other than the one that had the questions, are things like determine, measure, characterize. So you want to use action words. They're called verbs. I don't know, maybe you forgot. And then again, he just has one little sentence at the end, but I think it's important to have something that kind of just wraps up. We started off talking about this, and now down here, this is going to the basis of future studies to characterize these factors. So, good verbs to use in your aims: examine, determine, characterize, elucidate, evaluate, identify, compare. One I don't like is validate. If you're validating something, then hasn't it already been shown? So what part of that is research? I'm not so sure. But, try to start your sentence with, an action of what you're going to do. So again, there's their title. 1/3 of the world's population carries TB. That'll get your eyes open. And then he says, here's the gap. Efforts to reduce this, there's a lack of diagnostics, there's not a vaccine, and then we don't totally understand, the immune response to TB. So, I wonder what they're going to study. And then in this section, this second paragraph is where he describes his preliminary data. And they have offset and italicized their hypothesis. And then aim 1, aim 2, and aim 3, and each of those has a hypothesis. And then right down here, and this one is actually a K08. K08s are clinical studies that are done particularly by clinicians who may want to do some of the research in the lab. So they might be taking patient samples and studying them in the lab or whatever. Anyway, it's a training or career transition award, which I think was a good idea to remind the reviewer, this is not an R01. You know, I'm just a kid. I'm just a kid. I'm just a little. So think about, you know, how to state your hypothesis, add in some explanation of what you're going to do. Make sure you include some preliminary data here. And this one has the bar, but oh, this is another clever thing. So she made the bar a color that when you Xerox this, the bar doesn't show. It's almost like transparent, but it's easy to see on your computer. Yeah, characterize often gets flagged as phishing. I don't think so. I think it just depends on how you use characterize, Dr. Schreihofer, because it can be a phishing. You're right, but I do think it depends on how you're using it, because I've seen people use that before. Let's see. She's actually italicized her aims, bolded her hypothesis. It doesn't matter. I mean, I do think a lot of reviewers expect the aims to kind of be bolded just so they can find them. But what they're really looking for is, can I find it? And this particular grant is a K23, which is also a clinical. It's a patient-centered outcomes research. Sorry. I wanted to have a couple of these have clinical relevance because I know some of our clinical faculty are like, well, that's not how we do things. Well, yeah, it is. Here it is. Here's a funded clinical study. And she, instead of kind of, to me, if you're going to say test the prediction, blah, 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 isn't that the same as the hypothesis? But yeah, I don't know. And she just has one paragraph, but that's okay. One paragraph was enough. Excuse me. And look, she talks about the data that they already have and that they published. And then recently we have shown blah, 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 blah. So recently, or we have preliminary data that indicates, et cetera. Okay, what about the word explore? Oh, yeah, I think explore. And I took that list off of a grant writing webpage. You're right, Dr. Cunningham. I do think that it's a little bit fishing. You're right. So let's try to use strong words. Yeah, and then she's got a summary at the bottom. This is a R01. I'm sorry, I cut part of it off. It has 3 aims. They bolded and underlined in case you're blind. No, I'm just kidding. But I wanted to show this one too, because sometimes you have, these aren't necessarily sub-aims, but these might be individual experiments that are going to be done to accomplish this aim. And they mention, again, specific aim parts throughout their description. That's another way to do it. And there's their preliminary data. The only thing I'd kind of ding him on, so he has, how important this is, but the hypothesis, we have to kind of look to find it. He might have done something to make it a little more obvious. So think of grants as selling your ideas to the reviewers. What's your idea? That's your hypothesis. What are your abilities? That's your preliminary data. How likely are you to succeed, which is kind of based on your preliminary data, and that's your feasibility. And why are you the best person to do this at the best place? And what you're doing is important. And again, no one expects somebody, to cure cancer. I don't know if you noticed, but they haven't cured cancer yet. So for something to be significant, it's even for a graduate student's project is significant in that it's going to help us to better understand whatever this thing is, if nothing else. But I think this keyword right here, how feasible, how likely is it that this is going to work? And the way that I think that you convince them is showing what you've already done, as far as publications, but also as far as preliminary data. I think this is pretty much how you would try to sell this if you were having lab meeting. We did some experiments, looked at 5 mice, and what we found was so and so. So that makes us think that this is how this process works. So then what I would like to do next is, 50 mice, because, to confirm this and analyze it, and we got lots of mice. And this is really an important component of this process. Problems with the aims, too ambitious. This tends to be something that new investigators are more like, if I put a whole lot of stuff in there, they're going to give me the money. Yeah, well, again, if you put too much in there, two problems. The study section can't add money to your budget or time to your grant. So they have a pretty good idea how long it's going to take to accomplish these things. So make sure that you don't want to propose to kind of do nothing, but you also don't want to over propose. Just be realistic. And then having these aims with no explanation, no description of what you're going to do. Formatting issues, overuse of bolding, underlining, or italics. So I think you see all of these examples I showed you, they all use bolding, underlining, and or italics, but they're very sparingly used, because then otherwise it just loses its emphasis. And again, use them consistently throughout the proposal. Something to keep in mind. Are the review panels getting tougher? Sorry, it's Halloween joke. So this came straight from the NIH as well, and its current criteria for scoring the applications provide transparent and fair guide to evaluate diverse applications based on aggregate merit, blah, blah, blah. This is the Paula Gregory part. Scoring criteria are included in the program announcement. You should read it. It's down near the bottom. So most of us just read that part up at the top and what the budget limit is or whatever. If you go down to the bottom part, it will tell you what the review criteria are. And so use those to help you guide you in writing your aims so that you hit the mark in what this program is about. If you really want to know how to write a good application, serve on study section. And we do have some people, I know, Mark Cunningham, I think you've been on as a, what did they call it, like early stage reviewer or something like that. But we will be having a mock study section in February, so people can sign up. And I have some grants for you to review. They're real grants. You get a chance to practice reviewing, reading something critically. And I think the more you look at different grants, the better your own grant will be. Questions, you guys. I just rattled on. Any questions, comments? I know we've had a couple comments in the chat. Yeah. No? All right. Well, thank you everybody for taking time out after lunch for this. I'm going to remind you, and also we'll be posting and sending information out to everybody about the specific aims workshop next month. If you are planning to submit a grant for the spring, this would be a fabulous way to get feedback from people that have been on study section, who can really tell you a little more, both written comments and a discussion. And also, there'll be other people's aims pages there, so you can get an idea of some other, like I'm all the time getting new ideas, except for the diagram about eating. Thanks for coming, everybody.